All right, hello, good morning, and welcome to our second webinar of the new COVID funding relief for small businesses. We had quite a few people sign up today, so we are going to give a few moments for those who have signed up to go ahead and log into this webinar today. Welcome to our new attendees. Just a reminder, we are giving a few moments for those to log into the webinar. I see that Javier has a question. Javier, if you could type it into the chat box. I see that you have your hand raised. Also, a couple housekeeping things before we get started. If you do have any questions that come up, be sure to use the Q&A rather than the chat box. This helps us keep track of the questions that you're asking and helps us to make sure that we do answer those questions. They tend to get lost in the chat box if you do use the chat box. So again, make sure to use the Q&A of this webinar for any questions that you have that come up. We will allow time at the end to answer any questions. Our presenters today are really great about answering any questions as they come up, so they will be awesome about answering those questions. And we did have 44 sign up for today, and we only have 17, so I'm going to go ahead and allow a couple more minutes for people to log in, just in case anyone is having any issues. All right, we'll go ahead and get started because we are at 9:03 and we want to be aware of everyone's time, and there's quite a bit of information to cover today. Our presenters today are CJ Johnson, and a business analyst from SBDC, and also Tom Fulcher, business analyst from the SBDC. CJ, if you'd like to take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you for all of you for taking time out of your busy days to sit with us and learn a little bit more about this crazy thing called PPP and EIDL and all the other SBA disaster loans. Today, we're going to be covering quite a few things. And as we speak, some new additional information has just been released. So Tom will probably touch on it a little bit more further in the program, but the topics for today are on the PPP Loan Program, the first draw, second draw, and its forgiveness, the EIDL Loan Program Extension, and the EIDL Advance Grant. We'll also be speaking about the Debt Relief Program, and then grants for the Shuttered Venue Operators. But before we begin, let's tell you a little bit that this disclaimer is already outdated because we just got fresh, brand new news on some new processes and some new documentation. So as we are presenting now, some of that information is not in this slide deck. Today I'm co-presenting co-presenting with my team member, Tom Fulcher. Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure, thanks, CJ. Yeah, my name is Tom Fulcher. I've been a business analyst with the SBDC for 11 years now, and work in a variety of areas, including branding, angel and venture capital, and export, as well as just general business. And happy to be here as part of the team, also presenting information on the disaster relief packages.
Thank you. And I'm CJ Johnson. I've been with the SBDC about 1.5 years. Prior to that, I was in commercial lending for a couple decades and have specialized in SBA lending, among other conventional lending. And so I enjoy working with small businesses like yours and helping them to grow and thrive. Today, before we begin, a little bit about the Maricopa Small Business Development Center. We are part of a statewide network, America's SBDC Arizona, which is accredited by the nationwide America's SBDC. America's SBDC is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA, and hosted by Maricopa Community Colleges. We enjoy a productive partnership with the City of Peoria and with Arizona Commerce Authority. Our mission is to guide, educate, and support business clients, from pre-venture clients who simply just have an idea to businesses starting out, as well as long-standing existing businesses. Our no-fee counseling focuses on helping launch, grow, and sustain businesses. Our team of business analysts have experience in many industries listed here. We have experts in finance, export, international trade, technology, marketing, and manufacturing. The Maricopa SBDC also offers no-fee research and training programs with access to tools and resources to help business development. Here you can see some of the valuable resources offered to our clients. For instance, we have Growth Wheel. It helps businesses grow, focus on the specific aspects of their business. Live Plan is an online platform which produces a business plan. Profit Sense is a web-based financial analysis tool. We also partner with the SBDC Net, and that has resources that provide numerous research reports that address critical information such as IP protection or trademark, copyright, patent law, just to name a few. And then also we have IBIS World, which provides trusted industry research on thousands of industries worldwide, all in order to help business owners such as you make informed decisions about your business. Today we'll be discussing the latest information on the first draw PPP, the second draw PPP, and then also the forgiveness of it. The purpose behind the PPP loan was to assist business owners in keeping their employees on their payroll while we ride out the effects of COVID. So here, we also wanted to discuss that the first draw was in regards to businesses that did not apply for the PPP funding in 2020. Now they may apply for the first time. If you did, then you have your second draw. And if you have used all or will use all of your PPP funding that you did receive, you'll be eligible for a second round of PPP funding. There's some dates on here that January 19th, the PPP is now open for both the first draw and the second draw applications to all participating financial institutions. And then the deadline date for this is March 31st, or until the funds are expended, whichever comes first. The businesses that are eligible to apply on the first draw, housing cooperatives, designation marketing organizations, Certain nonprofits still eligible are, of course, are the business entities, the partnerships, LLCs, sole proprietors, and then the specific nonprofits. To be eligible, you must have been in operation on February 15th of 2020 and not have permanently closed. You were eligible self-employed individual, an independent contractor, so if you're a 1099, or sole proprietor with no employees, or if you had employees to whom you paid salaries, payroll taxes, or if you did pay independent contractors. For the seasonal businesses, they're eligible if in operation for any 12-week period between February 12th, 2019 and February 12th of 2020. Partnerships are eligible and file one application as a partnership. Now to apply, you go through your SBA lenders. We do have a listing of them. This is a little cutout of them, but if you're in the second draw, you can still use the same lender that you used prior if they are still taking those applications. So if you need assistance in locating one, you can call one of us at the SBDC and we can help guide you through locating a lender for you. The applications are just slightly different between the first draw and the second draw. Here on the left, you see where it just has the multiplier of the 2.5 and then the EIDL and all that. But on the second side, it does include our NEICS code industries, the 72, and they'll be using the multiplier of a 3.5. Then also the other highlight on here that the EIDL advance is no longer being excluded. I mean, it is being excluded, so we don't have to worry about that any longer as well. And some of the rules that applied before are still applying now. At least 60% of the funds must be used for payroll purposes. And then the remainder can be used towards those eligible expenses for the forgiveness portion of it. Some of those eligible expenses have been expanded, so they're not as limited as they were before. So as before, they had the salary and wages that you could, payment for vacation and parental, family, medical, or sick leave, which is a huge help, you know, for people who had to take care of their families during this time. Allowance for separation or dismissal, payroll of the employee's benefits, the group health care, group life, all of those type of things. Also, they extended it to the state and local taxes that are assessed on compensation of employees. And then for sole proprietors or independent contractors, the wages, commissions, income, all of those type of things are also going to be included. No more than 40% of the funds can be used for the other business expenses. Expanded use of the funds includes the rent or mortgage interest, so for business and personal property, utilities, interest on debt obligations that were incurred before February 15th, 2020, and then covered operation expenses, property damage, supplier costs, and even workers' protected expenditures. In order to calculate this, and I think this is probably the part that people trip up on the most and doing the calculation, it's just simply determining the payroll costs on a basis of 2019 or 2020 for employees whose principal place of residence is within the United States. For seasonal businesses, the date ranges may vary. You subtract any compensation paid to the employee in excess of a salary of $100,000, and then you calculate an average monthly payroll cost. Then you divide that by 12. You take the multiplier of 2.5, and this is for the standard industries. You multiply by 2.5, then you add the amount of the economic or the EIDL loan that you wish to refinance. And that's if it's been received between January 31st and April 3rd of 2020. But do not include any EIDL advance amounts that were received. Did I get that right, Tom? All right. First draw PPP loan calculation examples, excuse me. Too much talking too early in the morning. Here are two examples of the first draw. So if you have an aggregate payroll from 2019 or 20 of 120,000, and this is in the instance that no employees are making more than 100,000. And then you subtract any compensation to any employee in excess of it, so we wouldn't have to do that. You divide by 12, giving you the $10,000, and then you multiply it out by the 2.5, giving you the 25,000. And then on step 5 here, we're not refinancing any EIDL, so that's 0. So the maximum loan amount for this example is 25,000. And then the second column is just if some of the employees make more than 100,000. And we go through the example, getting down to the average monthly being at 100,000, multiplying it out by the 2.5, and ending up with the maximum loan amount potential of 250,000. Here, if you're self-employed or seasonal, we have a little notation here. If you're self-employed, filing a 1040 and a Schedule C. If you have no employees, you follow the same basic calculation. For step 1, you refer to either your 2019 or 2020 Schedule C, line 31, net profit amount. If the amount is over 100,000, reduce it to 100,000 and then continue to the other steps to determine your loan amount. And for seasonal employers,
Hey, CJ?
Yes.
If I can just add on that, if you are Schedule C, if you also have employees, you do add the payroll for employees to this line 31 amount.
Thank you. Thank you. For seasonal employees, for step 1, you just use the average total for payroll for any 12-week period that you select beginning February 15th of 2019 and February 25th, 2020. And then continue on with the steps of 2 through 5 to determine your loan amount. Here, be prepared to have documentation supporting the dollar figures that you come up with. The documents may include the 941, and the 941 is used by employers to report their income taxes, Social Security tax, or Medicare taxes that are withheld from employees' paychecks. It's also used to pay the employer's portion of the Social Security and the Medicare tax. You also, another form is the state quarterly wage unemployment insurance tax reporting forms. You can use the payroll information if you have an outsourced payroll company. You'll need evidence of retirement and health insurance contributions. And then also you can use a payroll statement or similar documents from the pay period that is covered February 15th to validate the business was in operation. Loans qualify for full forgiveness if during the cover period, the following loan disbursement, the employee compensation levels are maintained, that at least 60% was used on payroll, and then the remaining 40% are used on qualified expenses. And if you want to use the full amount towards payroll, that's fine, but you can't use less than 60%. The loan forgiveness period, borrowers can now choose the length of the cover period from 8 to 24 weeks. In the original disbursements, they only had an 8-week choice. And then on the second phase, they had moved into, well, they had the choice of 8 or 24, but this go around, everybody that is applying can choose between the 8 or 24 weeks. And then again, the real big one here was that the EIDL advance is no longer deducted from the forgiveness amount. And then simplified application for loans that are 150,000 or less. And this may be something that was rolled out this morning, Tom, I'm not sure, on the application being available now at this point.
Well, I think we received a copy of the application about 15 minutes before this started. Although we may have that, we've not reviewed it, and certainly that would mean lenders have not created their own version of this yet. So we'll be reviewing that, and I'm sure you can meet with your counselor. We'll have more information next week, and we'll look at what we can also post.
Sounds good. And then any PPP loan that is not forgiven, this is what happens. It's a interest rate of 1%. And as a prior lender, that's an excellent rate. No matter how you cut it, it's a really good rate. Maturity date is up to 5 years. There are no prepayment penalties. And I do want you to be aware that the interest does accrue from the date of disbursement. There are no payments on the principal or interest before the date on which SBA remits the loan forgiveness amount to your lender. And as far as collateral and personal guarantees, they're not required. All right. And so here, the second draw loans and all that, Tom will be going into more, but I wanted to check and see if we are having any questions that maybe we can ask right now or answer. Laura?
Let's see. We had a few come up, but Tom was able to answer them while you were giving your presentation. Some other ones are about EIDL. So we have one from Judy. She asks, we received an EIDL, most of it remaining. We have an order to sell. What happens to the loan? Is it accelerated, forgiven, paid under original terms? If we can't sell, but we lose the business completely, what happens to the EIDL loan?
That is a loaded question. Tom, I'm going to defer it to you because for me, I'm not sure. I would have to look into that a little bit further. There's some questions that I would have.
Yeah, we'd have to take it. You know, my advice for Judy is you sit down with your SBDC counselor, go through the documentation, the exact situation. And that happens a lot with questions. They're so specific, they're hard to answer without further investigation. But you know, if you do sell the business, I'm sure that is outlined, and we'd have to look into that for you. If you close the business, the EIDL was not, if it was not personally guaranteed, then you know it's just an issue for the business. But we'll have to get back to you on that. So I recommend you make an appointment with your counselor to discuss that in specifics.
We also have another question from Chris. Does the statement EIDL advance no longer deduct from the loan forgiveness amount indicate that EIDL can be forgiven as well?
It does not. The EIDL advance is a non-repayment grant. It's not really a grant, it's called a non-repayment loan. The advance is not taxable and the advance is not deducted from your PPP forgiveness. However, if you have an EIDL loan, you still have a loan that you must pay on.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just the difference of the wording is idle advance and then idle loan. So the advance being the one that we're not having to add back or anything like that now.
Correct.
Dean asks, what happens if they took an idle loan after the dates that you guys had mentioned? And what if they did not file quarterly, state quarterly wages, etc.?
I'm not sure I really understand the question. The idle terms are the idle terms no matter when you took the loan. And if you're, as far as quarterly wages, again, I need to know more about what your question is. If you're other than a Schedule C or partnership and you have no wages, you have no basis for calculating a PPP. That's much I can say on that. And the same person asked, what do they mean by 8 to 24 weeks? As CJ said, all Paycheck Protection Program for the covered period for forgiveness is 8 to 24 weeks after the dispersal of the loans. And when you receive funding, you have anywhere from 8 to 24 weeks to utilize that funding and in a qualified way that would qualify for forgiveness. And that the length of that in between there is completely up to you.
All right.
Then I see we have one from Christopher. Is a PPP loan, if the PPP loan is used for payroll, how is it not taxable? And we'll be able to claim on taxes. Well, PPP proceeds have never been taxable. However, originally the IRS said anything that those proceeds were used to fund and those amounts that were forgiven, they would be not deductible. The new law that was signed into effect on December 27th reversed that. So yes, you can be forgiven for those and you can still deduct them on your taxes.
Yeah.
Then we got a question about if we got idle loan, is there still idle advance available? And we can give you a 100% guarantee, maybe. So that is one of those areas we are waiting for guidance from the SBA. Nothing has been issued on that. You know, for those that it appears, I mean, the idle advance was refunded. We just don't know if that's only for people who did not receive an idle loan and advance previously. But we have asked that question about what if somebody got an idle loan and the idle advance monies were already gone, can they still qualify for that idle advance? And as I present, I'll also be talking about something called idle grants. CJ, I'll let you address James. Is the accrued interest from disbursement calculated on the original loan amount or the new amount of the unforgiven portion?
Can you say that one more time, please?
Yes. Is the accrued interest from disbursement calculated on the original loan amount or the new amount of the unforgiven portion?
It's the unaccrued. I am going to read. Oh, I could actually see the chat.
It's in Q&A tab
Oh, it's in Q&A. Darn it.
from James.
So he's just asking if it's accrued interest on it.
Is it accrued? So if somebody got a $50,000 loan,
Mm-hmm.
is the interest accrued on that $50,000, or if after it's forgiven, is it only accrued on, say, the $4,000 that's remaining? So it's kind of a mix. It's kind of a hybrid answer because interest accrues,
Right.
and then when forgiveness happens, everything's forgiven, including that interest. So
Correct.
I think interest would then start accruing again, or start being accruing again on the remaining loan amount, if that makes sense.
And that does make sense, absolutely. Because if it is forgiven, it's going to be forgiven up to a certain point, and then the remaining amount, it will just be adjusted as if only that amount was the only loan amount available at that time. So yeah, I would agree with that.
And then Nancy's asked, it's my first time applying for the PPP loan. Can I apply for the first and second draw? And the answer is no. And I'll cover that in a second. You'll see why. There's a maybe yes answer depending how fast you get the first draw and use it. So but I'll cover that in a second. And Christopher talked about if we're receiving PUA, can report. I don't know what PUA is, so I don't know. We'll just have to stop that question there, Christopher. You can either send a follow-up question saying what that is, but it sounds like you might need to meet with your counselor to discuss that specific situation. So why don't we move ahead to the next part of the presentation? And CJ, is it me from here?
Yep, it's you.
Okay, so we're going to talk second draw loans. And if we can go ahead and advance. So eligibility for a second draw loan. First, you must have received a first draw loan to that question we just addressed. You must have used the full amount or will use the full amount for authorized uses. Now, I want to be very careful here. This says used. It doesn't mean you have to have forgiven the full amount. I actually dealt with this just a few days ago. Somebody had, I don't remember the exact number, they had a $50,000 loan. They used it, but they were only forgiven literally, I think it was $49,400. So they had $600 remaining. We're concerned. That's fine. They utilized it. The rules don't say it had to be forgiven. So they did utilize it. They can qualify for a second draw loan. It has changed for second draw loan. You have to have no more than 300 employees, not 500. The big issue is you need to be able to demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross revenue between comparable calendar quarters, not just any 3 months, but comparable calendar quarters in 2019 to 2020. For example, second quarter to second quarter, third quarter to third quarter. If you were in business, but not fully in revenues until the first quarter of 2020, there is an allowance that allows you to compare second quarter of 2020 to first quarter of 2020. Third quarter to first or fourth quarter to first. So you know there is exceptions for that. And as you saw with what CJ covered in the first draw loans, there is information on how to calculate this for seasonal businesses. The maximum loan amount is also a change. The calculation is done very similarly. The maximum loan amount on first draw was $10 million. The maximum loan amount on second draw is $2 million. And then for borrowers in NAICS code 72, that is accommodations and food services, you can actually get 3.5 times your monthly average versus 2.5 times. And that, I just want to be very clear, that's for your second draw loan. You can't go back to the first draw loan and increase it. It's only for your going forward second draw loan. So we move ahead. To be eligible, you will need to provide proof that your business has experienced the reduction. However, you don't need to provide that proof at application, but you do need to provide that proof at forgiveness. So it's not a free pass, even though you're not applying it up front, providing it up front, you are providing it when you apply for forgiveness. We do have a little Excel spreadsheet that one of our counselors, Mike Bull, developed that makes it very easy to just plug your numbers in and demonstrate that you've got that 25% reduction. As far as forgiveness, go back, please.
Sorry.
No worries. As far as forgiveness, if your loan is 150 or less, documentation is not required at the time you submit your application for the loan. But you know, you will have more documentation, as I was saying, on 25%. So go ahead. So the calculation, as I said, quite similar. Get your average payroll cost for a month. Remember to take out anything in excess of $100,000. So if Paula was making $120,000, Paula can stay employed, but we can only count $100,000 of her compensation in this calculation. Then divide that by 12 and multiply it by 2.5, unless you are in NAICS code 72, and multiply by 3.5. We're not going to go into every potential calculation here today, but also if you were in business for 3 months instead of 12 months, there's ways to calculate all of this. We have a nice document from the SBA with lots and lots of examples. And again, different for Schedule C and partnerships. And if you are an S Corp, be aware an S Corp is not self-employed. You don't qualify for self-employed rules. You are a corporation, so you do have to follow those rules. Move ahead. So, you know, really we want to talk about how the changes from the new legislation apply to your business if you already completed the forgiveness process. So there's 3 scenarios, and I don't know if that's on the next slide, CJ. Let's take a look. No, just leave it here. So let's say you applied, received your loan, you haven't applied for forgiveness yet. Really, all those new usage rules that CJ talked about, covered supplier expenses, covered protective equipment, all those rules now apply to you, and you can get forgiveness in your forgiveness application for those. Your EIDL advance will no longer reduce your forgiveness. So in that situation, pretty straightforward. Let's say you completed, filed forgiveness, and it's not been approved yet. Again, that's a don't really worry about it too much situation. Your EIDL advance will no longer be removed from your forgiveness, and that'll be adjusted, and you'll be able to, get that full forgiveness. Trickier situation, let's say that you've gone through this, you've got forgiveness, your EIDL advance was reduced, and you've started making payments. Well, again, the SBA will remit to your lender basically we'll call it a refund, that money back, and your lender will give it back to you, and that full amount will be forgiven. So your payments will be returned to you, and the full amount will be forgiven, assuming you use the full amount, right? And the question is, we don't know timing and process yet. Now, I know we've been told by the SBA it'll be automatic. My advice would be, hey, touch base with your lender and say, hey, my payment's due next week. I'm not going to be paying it right, or whatever you need to discuss with your lender. Just make sure you're in communications with your lender on this issue. So moving ahead from second draw. Okay, so I do see somebody put PUA as unemployment for pandemic. So there's a couple things here. Remember, you have to have payroll for forgiveness. So if you're collecting unemployment, you can't have payroll. You can't be paying somebody who's on unemployment. That's fraud. So you do have to be very careful of that. And I would say if anyone's in that specific situation, again, meet with your counselor and let your counselor try to dig in with you a little bit. So on the economic injury disaster loan, really, let's move forward. All we can say in this is that the economic injury disaster loan has been extended. It's extended through 12/31 of 21 or until funds are expended. And this has not changed. The purpose is to meet the obligations of operating expenses that could not have been met except for due to the pandemic. It's a loan, as we talked. It's 3.75% interest for small businesses, 2.75% for nonprofits, up to 30 years. There's a 1 year to payment. No prepayment penalties or application fees from the government in this situation. So, pretty straightforward. Let's move ahead. So eligible businesses with 500 or fewer employees, including a wide range you can see listed there. Private nonprofits with 500 or fewer employees, faith-based organizations, agricultural businesses, and the applicant must be physically located in the United States. I won't read everything here. This is certainly available from us, but you can see how it can be used. I do want to point out one thing. It talks about payroll and healthcare benefits. Keep in mind you cannot double dip. So if you are using EIDL and paying payroll, you can't double dip that with Paycheck Protection Program. So if you've got both, our advice has always been try to spend them differently so that you utilize them both and don't run into problems back and forth. I don't think there's an issue of using EIDL after PPP is gone on certain things, but just be careful. You do have to maintain receipts and contracts for all loans for 3 years from the date of final disbursement. In reference back, I think CJ mentioned this on PPP. The other change there was that you do have to hold on PPP your documents for payroll documents 4 years from the date of forgiveness or your loan payoff, and 3 years for all other documents related to that loan from date of forgiveness or loan payoff. So everything has storage on it, right? Everything with disaster relief has storage. You got to hold on to stuff.
Right.
So, and then you'll see a list of ineligible. You can't go buy a boat. Laura here wanted to buy a new motorcycle with hers. We told her she couldn't do that. You can't refinance long-term debt. You can't pay off loans. So lots of penalties here. So just be careful with how you use the money.
Yeah, just document. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. Great advice, CJ. Let's move ahead. So the EIDL application is online. Nothing's changed there. It's open. We have had sporadic reports that if people have gone and said it's not working, we have seen it, that there's been updates coming. So we've seen a couple comments. So apparently there are some occasional issues with that. We are still waiting, as we said earlier, for updates on the EIDL program from the SBA. They started with the first draw, paycheck protection, second draw. They've just issued a bunch of information on follow up to that with forgiveness applications and debt relief. So it's all coming, a little at a time sometimes. So stay tuned with us on these. Let's move ahead.
Yeah, and real quick too,
Yes,
sometimes with this online application, if you don't clear out your history, the URL's picking up some old history and it's taking you to an old address. So you might want to just clear out that history on it and start new. That's what I was running into with some of my clients.
Okay. So EIDL Advance, or the EIDL grants, as they are called, these are new, and we are waiting for some official guidance to be released by the SBA on this. What this does is for companies no more than 300 employees located in low-income neighborhoods who experience an economic loss of 30%. Now, we are waiting for some definitions. Is the economic loss of 30% on a quarter-to-quarter basis as paycheck protection program, or is it annual? We're not sure. But if you've experienced all those things, this allows you to get up to $10,000 when combined with the EIDL Advance. So if you got, it does mean you got an EIDL loan though previously. So if you got the loan and got zero advance, and these things apply to you, you can get up to $10,000 in the grant. Let's say you got the loan and got $5,000 in an advance, and everything else applies to you, you can get an additional $5,000 in the grant. So the total between your advance and grant will be $10,000 maximum. So I just wanted to touch base on that again. We're waiting for guidance on this program. Move ahead. So as CJ was saying, document, 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 read all your loan documents in detail, make sure you understand the terms. I know we had someone asking about what if I go out of business. It's really understanding your loan documents there. Discuss with your SBDC counselor, of course. Keep all your application numbers, all your contact information, keep your login information for the portal, and keep detailed records. And then we've touched base on some of the record keeping requirements. This is critical to your successful use and forgiveness. Move ahead. So SBA debt relief. I don't know if we have another slide on this. Yeah, we're waiting for official guidance. In essence, the debt relief program provides a financial reprieve for small business. The SBA will pay 6 months of principal and interest, was how it was originally released. That debt relief program was extended with the law that passed on, or that was signed into law on 12/27. We just received guidance on it again about 15 minutes before, and it's a little mind-numbing to review. So we have to go through that. But in essence, if you had this program before, you got 6 months of debt relief, it appears that you could receive another 3 months of debt relief, and there are certain conditions, and so it's conditions, that language we're trying to understand. If you had an existing 7A 504 microloan or get one, it looks like you could qualify and never receive relief. It looks like you could qualify for 6 months of relief. If you are within certain NAICS codes, those are considered in the language of the bill hardest hit by the coronavirus, you can actually, with those 3 months, get another 5 on top of that. And everything in there says with certain conditions. There's lots of examples. So, if this is you, if you've got an existing 7A 504 or SBA microloan, please meet with your counselor. If you're not a client yet, please sign up, and Laura or CJ will show you that at the end. And meet with your counselor about this to understand how to qualify for this. Debt relief was in the past supposed to be automatic, and but I never believe in leaving things to chance. Definitely a lot of communications with your lender are always in order. So that's as much as we can share with you on debt relief right now. We're excited that it's coming, but we don't have a lot more information. So move ahead. I think we have one more program, and that's grants for shuttered venue operators. So it's officially called the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant. This is NAICS 71, entertainment and recreation. So performing arts venues, movie theaters, museums, talent representatives. There are questions of whether ancillary businesses will also qualify. Right now it's limited to 71, but this is one of the things that the SBA's rules could come out and address. If somebody is one of these financially distressed venues, which probably all of them are, they can qualify for the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant. And that can cover up to 45% of annual gross revenues. And so there's some rules. We're trying to understand what that means. But if you are a shuttered venue operator, you cannot get the PPP and this grant. Be careful with that. Now, if you already got a PPP in 2020, you're fine. You cannot get a second draw. If you didn't get a PPP previously, you cannot get a first draw. It is an either or program, and this program will probably be much more beneficial to you. If anyone out there is involved with a shuttered venue operator run by a nonprofit or with partial municipal or government ownership, for lack of a better term, there are allowances in the bill for that, but we have to wait for SBA to come out with the rules on what exactly that means. So good program, waiting for a lot of information on this still. Moving ahead. I think that's all we wanted to share today. It looks like we have a number of questions in the Q&A, so we can hop over there.
We do have a few questions in the Q&A. Christopher asks, similar to the second loan, I think you already answered this. Similar to the second round loan, yeah, I was going to say, does businesses need to have 25% less in 2020 than in 2019? And Tom has already answered that. Again, this webinar is being recorded for your future reference.
Yeah, the 25% was to qualify. The forgiveness rules are the same.
Let's see, Chad asks, what about $1,000 for each company or each employee could get with EIDL? I tried putting in for last May, but they ran out of money by the time they got my application. So even though I put in an application for the first business in March of 2020, the original CARES Act was signed into bill in after 3 days before he submitted the application, and they ran out of money. So I guess he's asking, what would be your advice for this time around?
Well, yeah, that's part of what we were saying, Chad, that we're waiting for guidance. The EIDL advance was refunded. The EIDL advance is still $1,000 per employee, up to $10,000. Beyond that, we don't know. There's many questions. Can people apply for a second EIDL? We don't think so. What if they got the EIDL, like in your situation, but not receive an advance because there was no money? We hope so, but we don't know, and no guidance. So I think part of the reason it's taking a while, they're going through all these situations, and not only do they have to have answers of yes, you can apply, or no, they have to have a process. So we think that's why it's taking so long. All I can say is stay tuned on that one, and we'll let you know.
And then our last question in the box is from Jane. If you received a $10,000 grant already, then received an EIDL loan and otherwise qualified for this new grant, are you still eligible, or did the original 10K negate applying for the new grant?
Again, this is what we're waiting on for more clarification. Absolutely. And as soon as we know too, we'll be posting it to our website and keeping that updated.
Looks like that was all the questions in the Q&A box. Again, if you have any questions and you might have put them into the chat box, be sure to put them in the Q&A box to make sure that we answer them. I have posted the request for counseling link in our chat box as well. Be sure, if for those specific questions that came up, especially during this webinar, be sure to submit a request for counseling. You know, our counselors are very well qualified. They have access to COVID-19 resources. They also have a great breadth of different areas of expertise. A couple other things on our website to think about is we do have a COVID-19 resource tab, so be sure to check that out and that is where, as CJ mentioned, is where we do post all of our updated information that we do receive. We also have a counselor's biography tab, so that way you can read to see what are the areas of expertise that our counselors have. We also have our training events calendar. We do have this week coming up is our Great Marketing Turnaround. So if you need support with some marketing, especially during this time, we highly suggest you sign up for that webinar. It will be highly interactive. And then also make sure to follow us on social media to stay current on any programs that we have coming up and any information that we can offer to our clients as well.
And then we do have these upcoming webinars. If you make note of those and sign up, these are all very valuable and relevant for the time that we're in right now. So please take advantage of these. We'll have a repeat of this presentation on January 27th. And then we have some marketing, as Laura mentioned earlier. We'll be bringing up the financial side of things, knowing your business credit score. And then we're going to delve into restaurant resilience series. So lots and lots of good training coming up. So.
Yes, so thank you all for joining. Actually, before we get to the thank you, I did have a couple of last minute questions that popped into the Q&A. CJ,
okay.
A moment to answer them.
Sure.
Judy asks, what happens to EIDL if a business has to close?
You still have a debt obligation. So whether the business is open or closed, the debt contract is still in effect.
Yeah, and you would have to look at your specific situation. It depends on the amount of the EIDL. When it was, there's so many individuals, so that's Judy, I would definitely say you need to talk to your SBDC counselor. We're not going to be able to give you legal advice. Certainly, that's something you can also seek, and we can help you, with disaster relief phone numbers and local SBA people. So there's lots of things we can help you with. I see we have another question from someone that says, I have to wait for another program, but it's difficult. I need assistance. So many businesses got grants and loans. No one can help me, ? It's not a specific question we can address there. I would go back to that link that Laura provided to register for counseling. Our services are no charge, and register for counseling. Tell them what you need help with, and Connie or Laura or someone on our ops team will make sure you get matched up with an appropriate counselor to try to look at your specific situation and help you. I'll also add that there are lots of other parts of the COVID relief. The omnibus bill that passed was 5,600 pages. And of course, today we inaugurate a new administration, and it sounds like there'll be even more stuff coming out of that. But we have a couple of the things that we don't talk a lot about: the Family First Coronavirus Response Act and the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. They have ways where sick leave in COVID situations, COVID impacted sick leave could have been covered. There are employee retention tax credits. There's lots of other things out there. And many of those, though, do not allow you to double dip. If you had gotten employee tax retention credits, you can't use that amount of money in your PPP for forgiveness. So there's other programs out there, and the funding that came out of the CARES Act and potentially some of this new funding also went to a lot of communities, counties, cities, et cetera, who have their own grant programs. And we're doing our best to keep track of those and possibly guide you to those situations as well. So definitely follow those links that Laura's provided for both events and counseling.
All right, so thank you all for joining us today. If there are no more questions, that will conclude our webinar for the day. At the end of this program, when you exit, there will be a feedback survey. Please provide us with that. That gives us a better understanding of how we can best support you during this time, during this pandemic, and it gives us a better understanding of different webinars that you all might be interested in. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Again, this webinar is recorded and we will be posting it up on our website. We hope you all have a great day.